Commander Alan Wright rubbed his tired eyes as he stood at the large window of Outpost Epsilon. The stars looked peaceful from here, twinkling against the black void of space. This quiet outpost marked the border between human space and the territory of the galactic conglomerate, a powerful alliance of 7 advanced alien species. 20 years of peace had made this posting boring. Too boring sometimes. Alan often found himself hoping for something, anything, to break the routine. "Be careful what you wish for," he muttered to himself. The outpost was small but important, built into an asteroid at the edge of the Orion arm. It housed only 35 crew members. Most were technicians who maintained the long-range sensors that watched for any threats to Earth or its colonies. Alan's second-in-command, Lieutenant Olivia Barnes, walked up beside him. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her uniform was perfectly pressed as always. "Still watching the stars, sir?" she asked with a small smile. "Just thinking," Alan replied. "Today marks 20 years since Earth joined the conglomerate." Olivia nodded. "And they still treat us like children who just learned to walk." It was true. Despite 2 decades of peaceful relations, the alien species of the conglomerate viewed humans as primitive newcomers. They constantly offered to upgrade Earth's technology, suggesting that human ships, weapons, and even everyday items were outdated and simple. "Did you see the new message from the Algorian ambassador?" Alan asked. "He's offering to replace our sensor array again. Says it's like watching space through a dirty window compared to their systems." Olivia rolled her eyes. "Maybe we should let them this time. I'm tired of fixing the current system every other week." Before Alan could answer, a sharp beep came from his wrist device. He tapped it, and the small screen lit up with an urgent message flag. "Commander, we're receiving an emergency transmission from Central Command," said the voice of Sergeant Frank Patel, their communications officer. "Admiral Hayes needs to speak with you immediately." Alan and Olivia exchanged worried glances. Emergency calls from Earth were rare, especially from someone as high-ranking as Admiral Gregory Hayes. "I'll take it in the command center," Alan said, already walking quickly down the curved hallway. The command center of Outpost Epsilon wasn't impressive by conglomerate standards. It had a central table with built-in screens, wall displays showing various sensor readings and workstations for 6 officers. Right now, only Frank was there, his dark fingers moving quickly over his keyboard. "Putting the Admiral through now, sir," Frank said as Alan entered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the stern face of Admiral Hayes. His gray hair was cut short, and deep lines marked his forehead. Even through the screen, Alan could feel the tension radiating from him. "Commander Wright," Hayes said without greeting, "our deep space sensors have detected a massive fleet entering the Orion arm from outside our galaxy." Alan felt his heart rate increase. "Conglomerate ships?" "Negative. Unknown signatures, not matching any known species." Olivia, who had followed Alan into the command center, stepped forward. "How large is this fleet, sir?" Hayes looked down at something off-screen. "Initial counts show over 3,000 vessels. Various sizes, but many of them are large, comparable to our biggest ships." 3,000. The number hit Alan like a physical blow. Earth's entire defense force consisted of fewer than 500 ships. Even with the conglomerate's help, they would be vastly outnumbered. "What's their heading?" Alan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Directly toward Outpost Epsilon. You're the first point of contact." Hayes' expression grew even more serious. "They'll reach your position in approximately 3 days. 3 days, Alan repeated. "What are our orders?" "The President has already contacted the Conglomerate Council. They're sending representatives to assess the situation. In the meantime, you're to maintain your position and prepare the outpost for possible evacuation." "Yes, sir." Hayes hesitated, then added, "And Commander, the Legacy Fleet is being activated." Alan couldn't hide his surprise. The Legacy Fleet, Earth's older warships that had been built before contact with the conglomerate, had been kept operational despite constant pressure to decommission them in favor of newer designs. Many officers joked that they were kept around out of human stubbornness, No one expected them to ever see action again. All of them, sir? All 247 ships. Admiral Collins is taking command personally. After the call ended, Alan stood silently for a moment, processing what he had just learned. A fleet of unknown aliens was heading their way. The Legacy Fleet was being activated. After 20 years of peace, they were facing a possible war. Should I begin evacuation? Preparations? Olivia asked quietly. Alan shook his head. Not yet. Let's wait for the conglomerate representatives. We need more information before we make any decisions. 6 hours later, a sleek conglomerate ship docked at Epsilon. It was beautiful in the way all conglomerate vessels were. Smooth lines, shimmering, hull material that seemed to change color as it moved, and no visible weapons despite being heavily armed. 3 representatives emerged from the ship, each from a different species of the conglomerate. Zixvan came first, walking with careful steps due to his crystalline body structure. Algorians like him were silicon-based life forms whose bodies contained complex crystal formations. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, and his transparent skin revealed swirling colors beneath. Next came Nerit, a saccharid female with green and blue scales covering her reptilian body. Her 4-fingered hands ended in sharp claws, and a ridge of spines ran from the top of her head down her back. Despite her fearsome appearance, saccarids were known for their diplomatic skills. Last was Ketho, a Primarch male who looked the most human-like of the 3. If humans had gray skin, 6 eyes, arranged in a circle and stood over 8 feet tall. Primarchs were the founding species of the conglomerate and often acted as its leaders. Commander Wright, Zixvan said in his musical voice as they met in the outpost's conference room. We came as soon as we received your government's message. Thank you for responding so quickly, Alan replied, gesturing for them to sit at the table. What can you tell us about these ships? The 3 aliens exchanged glances. We know little more than you, admitted Ketho, his 6 eyes blinking in different patterns, a sign of concern in Primarch body language. Our long-range scans confirm they are not of any known design. They appear to be biomechanical in nature. Biomechanical? Olivia asked. You mean part organic? Nerit nodded, her scales shifting color slightly. Their ships seem to have been grown rather than built. This suggests a highly advanced civilization with technology that may even surpass the conglomerates in some areas. Alan felt a chill run down his spine. If these aliens had technology that impressed even the conglomerate, what chance did Earth have? How many ships can the conglomerate send to help us? He asked. Another uncomfortable exchange of glances between the aliens. That is complicated, said Zixvan slowly. Most of our defense fleet is currently engaged in the Centauri expansion project. We can redirect approximately 200 vessels to your location within 2 days. 200 against 3,000? Frank whispered in disbelief from his position near the door. Ketho's eyes fixed on Alan. Perhaps, he said with clear reluctance, your government could deploy some of those older vessels you insist on maintaining, the ones your military refuses to decommission despite our technological offerings. Alan understood immediately what Ketho meant. The Legacy Fleet, the ships that the conglomerate viewed as outdated museum pieces. The Legacy Fleet has already been activated, Alan informed them. They should arrive shortly after your ships. Interesting, Nerit said, not quite hiding the doubt in her voice. We had assumed those vessels were kept for historical purposes, rather than combat readiness. Alan smiled thinly. You'd be surprised what those old ships can do. Humans have a saying, old dogs still have teeth. The 3 representatives looked confused by the idiom, but Alan didn't explain further. Let them keep underestimating human technology, he thought. Maybe that would work to their advantage in the coming battle. As the meeting continued into the night, discussing defense strategies and evacuation plans, Alan couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The peace they had known for 20 years was ending, and humanity's old fleet, the one the conglomerate had laughed at, was about to face its greatest test. Chief Engineer Samantha Miller wiped sweat from her forehead as she crawled out of the narrow maintenance tunnel. The Legacy Fleet Command Center, buried deep under the Rocky Mountains on Earth, was always too warm in the lower levels. 50-year-old, cooling systems still worked well enough, but no one had bothered to upgrade them. Why fix what isn't broken? Sam muttered to herself, a phrase she repeated almost daily. The command center was a massive complex, stretching for miles inside the mountain. It had been built long before humans met the conglomerate, during a time when Earth feared alien invasion. Now it served as the home base for ships that most of the galaxy thought should be in museums. Sam checked her tablet, reviewing the maintenance reports from the night shift. Everything looked normal, the same minor issues that always needed attention when maintaining old technology. She smiled with pride. These ships might be old, but under her care they remained ready for action. Her assistant, Eric Johnson, suddenly burst into her office, his face flushed with excitement. "Sam," he shouted, waving his tablet wildly. "We've got activation orders. All of them." Sam stared at him, not understanding at first. "What do you mean, all of them?" "The entire Legacy fleet. Every single ship. Admiral Hayes has issued full activation and deployment orders. They're to head to Outpost Epsilon immediately." Her coffee mug slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor, but Sam barely noticed. In her 15 years working here, there had never been a full activation. Training exercises used at most 20 or 30 ships at once. But all 247 vessels? That could only mean one thing. "What's happening, Eric?" she asked quietly. Eric's excitement faded, replaced by nervousness. Unknown hostile force approaching Epsilon. Thousands of ships, they say. The conglomerate can only send 200 vessels to help. Sam was already moving, heading toward the command level. "Start the awakening sequence. I want all systems. Checks completed within 2 hours, and get me a direct line to Admiral Collins." The awakening, as the engineering teams called it, was a carefully choreographed process. The Legacy fleet wasn't simply parked and waiting. The ships were kept in a state of semi-hibernation, with minimal systems running to preserve their readiness while reducing wear and tear. Within minutes, the command center transformed from a quiet workplace to a flurry of activity. Lights brightened, alarm tones sounded, and hundreds of engineers and technicians rushed to their stations. On screens throughout the facility, status indicators changed from green to yellow to red as systems came fully online. Sam reached the main control room, where screens showed the status of all Legacy fleet vessels. Some were housed here on Earth, while others rested at bases on Luna, Mars, and in the asteroid belt. Fleet Admiral Patricia Collins was already there, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. At 72, she was one of the few commanding officers who had actually served on these vessels when they were frontline ships. "Chief Miller," she greeted Sam with a nod. "How long until the fleet is ready?" 4 hours for the Earth-based ships, 6 for Luna and 8 for the outer bases, Sam replied without hesitation. "All vessels should be spaceworthy within 8 hours, ready for combat in 10. Admiral Collins nodded, satisfied. "Make it happen." As Sam worked with her teams, a group of conglomerate military advisors toured the facility. They had been on Earth for a diplomatic mission when the crisis began, and now they watched the awakening process with poorly hidden skepticism. Fleet Commander Zondar, a tall Primarch with gray skin and 6 eyes, stood beside Sam as she checked the weapon systems on the EDS Indomitable, the flagship of the Legacy fleet. "These vessels use kinetic weapons?" he asked, watching as the massive railguns went through their startup sequence. "Not energy-based. Systems? Railguns, missiles, and a few surprises," Sam replied without looking up from her work. "Simple, but effective." "Against modern shields?" Zondar shook his head. "I mean no disrespect, Chief Miller, but conglomerate defensive technology is designed to repel energy weapons. Your projectiles will simply be stopped." Sam finally looked up at him, a slight smile on her face. "Maybe. Maybe not. There's only one way to find out, isn't there?" The first ships began rising from their underground hangars 3 hours later. The EDS Determined, a massive dreadnought nearly a kilometer long, was the first to break the surface, its dark hull gleaming in the morning sunlight. From the command deck of the Indomitable, still in its hangar, Admiral Collins watched the launch, with pride. Beside her stood Captain Richard Donovan, who would serve as her second-in-command. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Collins said as the Determined hovered above its launch pad, thrusters glowing bright blue. "The conglomerate representatives seem less impressed," Donovan noted, gesturing to where Zondar and his colleagues watched from a nearby observation platform. Collins shrugged. "Let them doubt. It won't be the first time humans have been underestimated." Across the solar system, similar scenes played out as the Legacy fleet awakened. On Mars, 12 heavy cruisers rose from the red desert. In orbit around Jupiter, the asteroid base opened to release 30 fast attack frigates. On Luna, the largest contingent, 75 ships of various classes, emerged from their hidden hangars beneath the moon's surface. News of the activation spread quickly. Media feeds across Earth and its colonies showed the ancient warships taking to space once more. Some citizens cheered the display of military power, while others questioned whether these old vessels could actually protect them. Throughout the conglomerate worlds, the reaction was one of puzzlement and, in some cases, amusement. The Algorian Information Network, one of the largest news sources in the galaxy, ran the headline, "Humans deploy museum pieces against unknown threat." Hours after the activation order, the Legacy fleet assembled in Earth orbit. The ships formed a precise formation, their dark hulls standing in stark contrast to the sleek, shimmering vessels of the conglomerate escorts. On the bridge of the Indomitable, now in position at the center of the formation, Admiral Collins sat in the command chair. Around her, officers monitored their stations with practiced efficiency. The ship hummed with power, its old engines running smoothly thanks to Sam's careful maintenance. "Fleet is assembled and ready, Admiral," reported Captain Donovan from his station. "Communications check complete. All vessels responding," added Lieutenant Ben Wilson, the communications officer. Collins nodded. "Navigation, plot jump course to Outpost Epsilon. Prepare for hammer drive activation." At the navigation console, Lieutenant Karen Mitchell entered the coordinates. "Course plotted, Admiral. Hammer drive standing by." The three conglomerate advisors, who had been assigned to the Indomitable for the mission, exchanged confused glances. "Hammer drive?" asked Zondar. "I'm not familiar with this system. Is it compatible with our fold space technology?" Collins smiled slightly. "No, Commander. The hammer drive was developed before we met the conglomerate. It's different." "Different how?" pressed another advisor, a reptilian saccharid named Telsic. "You'll see," was all Collins would say. She opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is Admiral Collins. Our mission is clear. We are to proceed to Outpost Epsilon and assist in defending against an unknown hostile force. Many believe these ships are too old, too primitive to be effective in modern combat." She paused, looking around at her crew. "It's time to prove them wrong. Activate hammer drives on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." Across the fleet, engineers like Sam activated the massive drive systems. Unlike the elegant fold space technology of the conglomerate, which gently bent reality to allow ships to slip through, the hammer drive lived up to its name. Space itself seemed to shudder as the Legacy fleet's drives powered up. Energy built to impossible levels, creating a visible distortion around each ship. Then, with a flash of blinding light, the fleet punched through reality, not slipping between the fabric of spacetime but tearing temporary holes through it. The conglomerate advisors on the Indomitable grabbed for support as the ship shook violently. The view screens showed not the smooth transition they were used to, but a chaotic tunnel of swirling energy. "Is this normal?" gasped Zondar, his 6 eyes wide with alarm. Captain Donovan chuckled. "Perfectly normal. Welcome to human FTL travel, Commander. It's not pretty, but it gets the job done." As the Legacy fleet thundered through space toward Outpost Epsilon, news of their departure spread across the galaxy. No one knew what would happen when these old ships faced the unknown enemy. But one thing was certain: humanity was about to remind the galaxy that age didn't always equal weakness, and sometimes the oldest teeth bite the hardest. Outpost Epsilon had transformed from a quiet border station into a bustling military hub. Commander Alan Wright hadn't slept in 36 hours, but adrenaline kept him alert as he coordinated with the arriving conglomerate ships. 200 vessels now in position, reported Lieutenant Olivia Barnes, her voice tired but steady. The conglomerate flagship Luminous Harmony has established central command. Alan nodded, studying the tactical display. The conglomerate ships were arranged in a beautiful complex formation, sleek vessels with glowing hulls and no visible weapons, though Alan knew they carried powerful energy cannons hidden beneath their smooth surfaces. "Any word from the Legacy fleet?" he asked. "Nothing yet, sir. The conglomerate advisors are suggesting we shouldn't count on them arriving in time." Alan frowned. The doubt in the aliens' voices whenever they mentioned the human fleet was starting to annoy him. Zix Von, the crystalline Algorian representative, approached Alan's station. His body shimmered with internal lights that pulsed with his words. "Commander, right, the enemy will be within range in 6 hours," he said. "Our scans still cannot penetrate their defensive systems, but we estimate over 3,000 vessels." "And their weapons?" "Unknown, but their energy signatures suggest significant power." Next to Zix Von stood Nerit, the reptilian Sassarid. Her scales had darkened, a sign of stress in her species. "Where is this Legacy fleet of yours?" she asked, making no effort to hide her skepticism. Surely they haven't broken down before even arriving. Before Alan could answer, alarms blared across the command center. The main view screen flickered with urgent warnings. "Massive energy spikes!" shouted Frank from his sensor station. "Something's happening." Space itself seemed to tear open about 1,000,000 kilometers from the outpost. Not one tier, but hundreds. Violent, jagged holes in reality that pulsed with chaotic energy. The conglomerate officers stared in shock, some backing away from the screens, as if the phenomenon might somehow reach through them. "What is this?" demanded Ketho, the Primarch representative, his 6 eyes blinking rapidly in alarm. "Some kind of weapon?" Alan smiled. "No. That's our fleet arriving." Through each tier in space emerged a ship, massive, dark-hulled vessels with visible armor plating and weapon systems. Unlike the conglomerate's elegant designs, these ships were built with clear purpose, not to look beautiful, but to fight and survive. The Legacy fleet had arrived. "What manner of FTL is that?" asked Ketho, his voice a mixture of alarm and fascination. "It appears incredibly crude." "We call it the Hammer Drive," Alan replied. "Developed before we met the conglomerate. Not as elegant as your systems, but it gets the job done." The communication system crackled and a firm female voice came through. "This is Admiral Collins of the Earth Defense Ship Indomitable. Legacy fleet has arrived and is assuming defensive positions." On view screens across both fleets, the Legacy vessels moved into formation. They dwarfed their conglomerate counterparts. The smallest human ship was larger than most alien vessels, and the dreadnoughts, like the Indomitable and Determined, were truly massive. Fleet Commander Zondar, who had arrived with the conglomerate fleet, shook his head as he studied the human ships. "Those cannot possibly be effective in modern combat," he muttered. "They have no energy shielding whatsoever." "And are those gun ports?" Alan didn't bother to correct him. Let them keep underestimating human technology. 4 hours later, the enemy fleet was visible on long-range sensors, a vast swarm of biomechanical ships moving with insect-like coordination. Initial attempts at communication failed completely. The unknown ships simply continued their approach, ignoring all hails. "Perhaps they don't communicate using the same methods we do," suggested Zix Von, working frantically at a console to find some way to establish contact. "Or perhaps they're not interested in talking," said Alan grimly. His words proved prophetic. Without warning, the lead enemy ships opened fire, strange, pulsing energy beams that shot toward the conglomerate's defensive line. "All ships, defensive positions," ordered Zondar. The conglomerate vessels responded instantly, their hidden weapons emerging from previously smooth hulls. Streams of energy shot back at the enemy ships as shields glowed with power. 3 conglomerate ships exploded immediately, their shields overwhelmed by the sheer volume of enemy fire. "Their weapons are primitive but numerous," shouted Nerit, watching the tactical display with horror. "Our shields cannot, Legacy Fleet, engage at will," came Admiral Collins' calm voice over the communication system. What happened next left the conglomerate representatives speechless. The gun ports on the Legacy ships opened, revealing not primitive cannons but massive railgun arrays. The ship's hulls, which had appeared to be simple armor, began to shift and change, plates moving to reveal more weapons and strange, pulsing devices. The first volley from the human fleet was stunning in its power. Hundreds of railguns fired, simultaneously launching projectiles at speeds that made them nearly invisible. When they struck the enemy ships, the results were devastating. Not clean holes or energy dispersion, but massive, catastrophic destruction. "How is this possible?" demanded Ketho, watching as enemy vessels were torn apart. "Those are just physical projectiles." Alan watched with satisfaction. Kinetic energy doesn't care about advanced shields designed to stop energy weapons. A chunk of metal moving at near light speed will tear through almost anything. But the enemy fleet was learning. They adjusted their formation, focusing fire on specific human ships. Energy beams lanced toward the EDS Determined, one of the largest dreadnoughts. Something strange happened. On the view screens, the beams clearly hit the Determined square on, but the ship showed no damage. In fact, it seemed as if the enemy fire had passed straight through it. "Holographic projection systems," explained Alan, watching the conglomerate representative's confusion. "Combined with multi-spectrum sensor jamming, the enemy sees our ships where they aren't." The battle intensified. The enemy ships, while numerous, seemed to rely on overwhelming their opponents with sheer numbers rather than superior tactics. Against the conglomerate vessels, this strategy was working. More alien ships were falling by the minute, but the Legacy fleet held firm. Their formation constantly shifted, confusing enemy targeting systems. When the railguns fired, they didn't miss, and strangest of all, the human ships seemed to absorb enemy fire, their hulls glowing briefly before returning to normal. "Why would you maintain such technology?" asked Zixavon, watching in awe as the supposedly obsolete human ships tore through the enemy fleet. "The conglomerate offered you our shield designs, our energy weapons, because humanity learned long ago never to put all our eggs in one basket," Alan replied, his eyes fixed on the battle. "Technology evolves, tactics change. What works against one enemy might fail against another." On the flagship Indomitable, Admiral Collins directed the battle with calm efficiency. The 3 conglomerate advisors assigned to her ship had fallen, silent, their earlier skepticism replaced by grudging respect. "Your ships are absorbing enemy fire," noted Zondar, watching as another energy beam struck the Indomitable's hull, causing it to glow briefly. "How is this possible without standard shields?" Sam Miller, who had joined the flagship as chief engineer, smiled proudly. "We took your shield designs, but instead of using them conventionally, we reversed the polarity and spread them throughout. Our armor plating. The energy doesn't bounce off, it gets absorbed and redirected to our weapon systems." "So each hit makes your weapons stronger?" asked Telsic, the Sassarid advisor. "Exactly. The more they shoot us, the harder we hit back." The battle raged for hours. The enemy fleet, despite its numerical advantage, was being systematically destroyed. The combined conglomerate and legacy forces worked in unexpected harmony, the aliens' speed and precision complementing the humans' raw power and durability. As the enemy numbers dwindled, their formation began to break. Ships attempted to flee, but the legacy fleet's railguns had impressive range. None escaped. When the last enemy vessel exploded in a flash of light, a cheer went up from the human crew members on Outpost Epsilon. Alan allowed himself a small smile of relief. They had won, and with fewer losses than expected. Zixavon approached him, the lights within his crystalline body pulsing slowly, a sign of deep thought among Algorians. "Your species confounds us, Commander Wright," he admitted. "When you joined the conglomerate, we assumed you would eagerly abandon your technology for ours. Instead, you adapted, integrated, but never fully converted. Alan nodded. That's humanity for you. We don't throw away what works just because something newer comes along. Across the communication channels, Admiral Collins' voice rang out. All ships stand down to condition yellow. Begin recovery operations for damaged vessels. Excellent work, everyone. The Legacy fleet, once mocked as outdated and primitive, had proven its worth, and the galaxy would never look at human technology the same way again. 3 days after the battle, the area around Outpost Epsilon was still busy with recovery operations. Damaged ships from both the conglomerate and Legacy fleets were undergoing repairs, while teams in specialized craft collected debris from the enemy vessels for study. The EDS Indomitable, which had suffered only minor damage, now served as the command center for post-battle operations. Its massive hangar bay had been converted into a temporary meeting area, where human and alien officers worked together to understand what had happened and who had attacked them. Admiral Patricia Collins stood at the head of a large table, surrounded by holographic displays showing analysis of the enemy ships. Her uniform was slightly rumpled after days without proper rest, but her posture remained perfect. We've identified them as the Hive Collective, she explained to the gathered officials. A previously unknown species from beyond the galactic rim. Based on the data we've recovered, they appear to be a conquest-oriented civilization. Across from her sat Grand Counselor Zor, the highest-ranking Algorian in the conglomerate. His crystalline body pulsed with blue and green lights, colors, indicating thoughtful concentration in his species. Without the Legacy fleet, we would have been overwhelmed, Zor admitted, his musical voice somber. Our tactical simulations confirm it. Our technology alone would have failed against their numbers. Other high-ranking conglomerate officials nodded in agreement, their earlier dismissal of human ships now replaced with genuine respect. Different problems require different solutions, Admiral Collins replied. Humanity's history is filled with examples of outdated technology finding new purpose. Commander Alan Wright, who had been asked to join this high-level meeting, watched the exchange with satisfaction. After years of being treated as technologically inferior, humans were finally being recognized for their unique approach to survival. In another section of the Indomitable's massive hangar bay, Chief Engineer Samantha Miller led a group of fascinated conglomerate engineers through a technical tour. The secret of the Legacy fleet was now being shared openly. These weren't simply old ships maintained out of stubbornness or sentimentality. Each vessel undergoes continuous updates, Sam explained, displaying a holographic diagram of the Indomitable's systems. We didn't reject conglomerate technology. We adapted it and combined it with our own approaches. A tall Primarch engineer named Lantor examined the display with all 6 of his eyes wide in surprise. You reversed our shield technology, he noted, pointing to a specific section. Instead of creating a barrier to deflect energy, we spread it throughout our armor plating to absorb energy, Sam finished for him. The energy doesn't bounce off. It gets captured and redirected to our weapon systems. Eric Johnson, who had been assisting with repairs to a damaged railgun system, added his own explanation. And our railguns aren't just firing metal slugs. Each projectile contains a miniaturized version of what you call a spatial disruptor. It creates a momentary tear in space-time upon impact. Like your hammer drive, realized a Sassarid engineer, her scales brightening with excitement. You weaponized your FTL technology. Sam nodded, pleased that they were finally understanding. Exactly. We looked at the physics behind it and thought, why use this only for travel? On the bridge of the Indomitable, Commander Wright stood with Zixavan, watching the recovery operations on the main view screen. Small craft moved between damaged ships, carrying repair teams and supplies. Your species confounds us, Commander Wright, admitted the crystalline being. When you joined the conglomerate, we assumed you would eagerly abandon your technology for ours. Instead, you adapted, integrated, but never fully converted. Alan smiled. That's humanity for you. We're stubborn that way. A valuable trait. It seems, Zixvan replied thoughtfully. The conglomerate has existed for so long that perhaps we became complacent. We believed our technology to be superior in all ways. Different isn't always inferior, Alan said. Sometimes it's just different. The Conglomerate Council will be recommending a full technological exchange program, said Zixvan. No more holding back advanced systems out of concern that you weren't ready. It seems you were more ready than we knew. As Zixvan left to join a meeting with other representatives, Admiral Collins approached Alan. Quite a change in attitude, she noted, watching the Algorian leave. Nothing like saving their lives to earn some respect, Alan replied with a small smile. Collins nodded, her expression becoming serious. This won't be the last we see of the Hive Collective. Our analysts believe this was just a scouting force. Scouting force of 3,000 ships? Alan felt a chill run down his spine. How many do they have altogether? We don't know. But we need to be ready when they return. 2 days later, a formal ceremony was held on Earth to honor those who had fought in the battle. The Grand Plaza outside Earth Defense Headquarters was filled with thousands of people, both humans and visiting aliens. Large screens showed the cow, ships of the Legacy Fleet in orbit, their dark hulls gleaming in the sunlight. President Laura Diaz stood at a podium, addressing the crowd. Behind her were rows of military officers including Admiral Collins and Commander Wright, as well as conglomerate representatives. Today, we celebrate not just a victory, but a lesson learned, President Diaz said, her voice carrying across the plaza. For 20 years, humanity has been part of the galactic conglomerate. We have learned much from our alien friends, shared in their knowledge and culture. But we have also maintained our own path, our own approach to technology and defense. She gestured to the screens showing the ships. Some called these vessels outdated, museum pieces, a waste of resources. She paused, smiling slightly. They're not laughing now. The crowd cheered, pride evident on every human face. Grand Counselor Imsor stepped forward next, his crystalline body catching the sunlight and sending rainbows across the plaza. On behalf of the Conglomerate Council, I extend our deepest gratitude to the people of Earth and particularly to the crews of the Legacy Fleet, he said. You have shown us that there is wisdom in maintaining diverse approaches to technology. The combination of our different methods created a strength that neither of us possessed alone. After the ceremony, a more private meeting took place in the President's office. Admiral Collins, Commander Wright, and Chief Engineer Miller represented the human side, while Imzor, Zixvan, and Fleet Commander Zondar represented the conglomerate. Our analysts believe the Hive Collective will return with a larger force within a year, said President Diaz, getting straight to the point. We need to prepare. Imsor nodded, the lights within his body pulsing with determination. The Conglomerate Council has authorized full technological sharing. No more restrictions, no more holding back advanced systems. And in return, asked Admiral Collins, knowing there would be a request, we would like your engineers to help adapt some of your innovations to our vessels, said Zondar, looking at Sam. Particularly the energy absorption technology and your holographic projection systems. Sam grinned. I think we can arrange that. Commander Wright looked out the window at the clear, blue sky. Somewhere up there, beyond the atmosphere, beyond the solar system, the Hive Collective was regrouping, perhaps planning their next attack. But they would find a different reception next time. Not just human ships or conglomerate vessels, but a true combination of both technologies. They laughed at our fleet, he said quietly, until they saw what humans built it to do. President Diaz nodded. And the next time no one will be laughing. As the meeting continued, plans were made for new ships, new weapons, and new defenses. The Legacy Fleet would remain a core part of Earth's defenses, but now enhanced with the best the conglomerate had to offer. And conglomerate ships would begin incorporating human innovations, creating vessels unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The old ways and the new, working together. Different approaches creating something stronger than either could be alone. For the first time since joining the galactic community, humans were being seen not as primitive newcomers, but as valuable partners with unique perspectives. Their stubborn insistence on maintaining their own technology, once mocked, was now recognized as wisdom. Sometimes the old ways still had teeth, and sometimes Those teeth were exactly what was needed. End.